Welcome to Science 7, and this will be your first unit, and our first unit is Ecology, and this is Lesson 1. So what we're going to talk about in this one is just give you some brief background on what is ecology and give you some definitions that you'll need for the first part of this unit. Okay, so within our environments we have living things and non-living things. All of our living things are what we call organisms, the living, or otherwise known as the biotic parts of the environment. Really small organisms that can only be seen with a microscope are called microorganisms. Now, everything that isn't an organism is classified as a non-living component of the environment, and non-living is also called an abiotic part, and that includes everything like rocks and water and sunlight and wind, anything that can't be considered alive. Now, the interactions between those biotic things and those abiotic things in the environment is what we consider an ecosystem. Now, the environment means everything that surrounds us. So it could be your room right now where you're sitting and watching this video. It can be your classroom, can be an environment. Obviously, when you step outside, you're in a different environment. Anything that is living or was once living, so even trees that have died and fallen down, those are still considered biotic things. And those abiotic, non-living things make up our environment. So everything that surrounds us. And as I mentioned before, there's many different types of environments. Ocean environments, forest environments, and of course, even your locker can be considered an environment. And inside your locker, for some of you, especially at the end of the year, you could have your own ecosystems within your lockers. The interactions between the non-living and the living things, if you have, say, a sandwich at the bottom of your locker, or a water bottle. When you drink from the lip of a water bottle, you're depositing bacteria into that water bottle. So as soon as you close that system, you have the abiotic factor, which is water and the plastic around it, interacting with the biotic factors, which is the bacteria, and you've in essence created your own little ecosystem inside that water bottle. Now, the parts of the ecosystem are as follows. The most common living thing in the ecosystems are your microorganisms. That means even though you look outside and you see a lot of squirrels or crows or eagles or the odd bear in our backfield, the most abundant thing in any ecosystem are the microorganisms, the things you can't see. Now, every type of organism that is out there, each individual organism is a species. And now when you have a group of the same type of species, that's considered a population of that species. And then when you have two or more populations sharing the same area, we call that a community. Now, the easiest way to explain this in terms of an everyday occurrence for you would be to think of you as a species, all of your family that live together in your home as your population, and then all of the homes on your street as your community. So here's an example. This is called a nested circle diagram, and it essentially models those communities. So if we say that our first species is a wolf, then for our population, we would have to have multiple wolves. Then in our community, we would have our wolf, but then we would have all of the other populations of species as well. So squirrels, bears, trees, eagles and hawks, owls, and plants and flowers. So all of those things together and the way that they interact makes up our ecosystems within our environments. So ecology then is the study of the world around us and to learn how those systems in the world work and how those interactions take place. But it's also all about learning how we are responsible to maintain and sustain those ecosystems. And one of the ways that we do that is by protecting different areas. So in your textbook on page 5, there's a very descriptive example of a valley called the Cohoots-Matteen Valley in BC. And the valley is traditionally a hunting and fishing area of one of BC's Aboriginal groups. That particular part of the Cohoots-Matteen Valley, they've cordoned off and they've made it a provincial park. and it is now considered a grizzly bear sanctuary. It's a protected area, so people are no longer allowed to go in there. So there's not only is there the grizzly population there, but it's home to salmon and beavers and wolves and otters and birds and insects and different trees and many different types of shrubs and multitude of other different living things there. So that has become its own protected ecosystem. So all of those things in that area and all things in any ecosystem depend on their immediate environment for survival. So let's go back to the non-living environment, and so our abiotic environment. So I mentioned that this can be our sunlight, our rain, snow, soil, creeks, rivers, mountains, rocks, temperature, wind, dirt. So any of those types of things that aren't actually alive. So animals need these things to survive as well, and the interactions between those things that have to take place in order for an environment to be healthy. So the living parts of the Huatzmin Valley, they interact with the non-living parts. So an interaction between a living being such as a grizzly bear eating other berries, that would be a living to living interaction. So that would be a living to living interaction. So a grizzly eating berries. Okay. So then you can also have a living to non-living interaction, and that could be something as simple as grizzlies drinking water. Drinking water or playing in the stream. Okay. Then you can also have a non-living to non-living interaction. And that could be like a stream or a river passing over rocks. Okay, so they would be weathering and eroding those rocks. Okay, so that makes 3 different types of interactions that you can have in an environment or an ecosystem. Okay. So living to living, living to non-living, and non-living to living. So what I'd like you to do before you come into our next class is to actually come up with your own 3 interactions, any interactions. It can be something that happens in your home, it can be something that you see happening outside, but come up with a living to living interaction, a living to non-living interaction, and a non-living to non-living interaction. All right? The other thing I want you to do is please read pages 4 through 7 in your Science Pro textbook. Okay. Before next class. And when you come into next class, we'll discuss this a little bit. I'll ask you a few questions. We'll have a little bit of a discussion, and then we're going to get right into a hands-on activity. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this lesson. Feel free to take a look at the next ones.